hit by a series of storms that went on for 2 long months. Not far from here, livelihoods have been lost and property and valuables destroyed. And there's a feeling among some that a lot of it could have been avoided, which has made people angry. Before we debate, and we will very shortly, let's hear a few personal stories. James and Becky, you were affected badly by this. James, what happened?
At the beginning of the year, we lost my sister's house down to the tidal surge. And then when the flood water started to rise from the moors, we've lost my parents' house and my nan's house and my dad's farm. And also had to evacuate my farm, which is one of the highest farms in the area.
And what about your livestock?
All my livestock had to be removed, taken to other farms. A lot of them has been sold and not replaced. I've lost potential earnings now for the next 3 to 4 months.
How does all this make you feel?
Very angry.
Why are you angry?
Because it could have been avoided if they just listened to the local people.
Alistair, you've lived in Mutchelney. That's an island.
It is indeed, yes.
What's that experience like for you?
It's been extraordinary. I mean, first of all, our thoughts obviously go to those whose houses and businesses have been lost and flooded. But on an island, it's completely different. There's a community there with 20-odd children who go to school, 40-plus people go to work every day. When you can't just get in your car and take the children to school, to get in a car and go to the office, you have to think about it. You have to dress up in wet weather gear, get your boots, your trousers on, wait for the boat in pouring rain. It's really very difficult. And then there's the communications, food, all those sort of general bits and pieces that you think nothing of just going out to get. It all takes a huge amount of time.
Most people can cope with some hardship for a short period of time, but this has been going on for 9 weeks.
Yes, we've had it before, a couple of weeks at a time, at the absolute most, about once every 10 years. But 9 weeks is a huge length of time, and something obviously went badly wrong.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for those stories. Some initial thoughts there, but let's meet our panel this evening. James Winslade, a farmer who's become the face of the flood victims. His family has been working the land here for 150 years. Pat Flaherty is the acting chief executive of Somerset County Council. Sue Armstrong Brown is the head of policy from the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. They manage 2,000 acres on the Levels. And in the Lion's Den, Richard Cresswell from the Environment Agency, which has come in for a lot of criticism, much of it, they claim, unfair. We also have among our audience the police, local politicians, and some of the many volunteers who have come to the rescue. We did ask for a government minister to join us, but no one from the Department for the Environment, DEFRA as it's called, was able to come here tonight. And you at home can get involved on Twitter using the hashtag #IOFloods. Well, now let's take our first question. It's from Councillor Justine Baker. Justine.
Why did it take so long for local authorities to get involved and help the residents that needed it so urgently?
Well, you're a councillor, Justine. Why do you think?
I don't think people listened. I don't think people realised how bad it was. I think people thought it would go away a lot quicker. But as you can see, I'm part of the community group FLAG that stepped up to the mark and fulfilled that gap. We're now working with the County Council and it's working extremely well, but it took a lot of time to get to that. From the beginning of the year, we've been working around a coffee table and now doing what the local authorities are doing.
OK, let's bring in the panel. Pat Flaherty from Somerset County Council. You must have had a well-rehearsed plan sitting on the shelf for an event like this. It was a question, wasn't it, of blowing the dust off it and getting to work. Is that what happened?
I believe that as a county council we were there from very early on, from day one before Christmas. I think certainly first of all we looked at our duty, what we absolutely had to do, which was to keep people safe. And we worked through our social care teams to make sure that we did keep people safe from day one. We clearly needed to move on from there, and there was that need, that express need from communities of how can we help. And I think going into the new year and through the new year, we were helping in whatever way we could in terms of providing boats and supporting communities as much as possible.
When did you decide it was a major incident?
That was towards the end of January. That was on the 24th, and that was because of a very bad weather forecast coming forward. more communities beginning to flood as the levels
I
continue
think
to
Sedgemoor
rise.
District Council beat you to it, didn't they? They declared their major incident just before. They're here tonight. Where's Sedgemoor? There we go. Did you feel isolated and alone in the early days of this emergency?
I think it'd be true to say we did, to start off with. Enough was enough. 40 square miles of Somerset flooded, and in conjunction with the leader, we took the view that we need to declare a major incident.
And what happened once you'd done that? Was it the panic button, number 10 and all that?
Well, what we wanted is the response that we got. We wanted others to recognise what's going on in Somerset, most importantly. And everything that's happened, we hoped would happen, to bring the eyes of the world on what's happening in Somerset.
So it was the publicity which did it?
Well, certainly, and to bring government to bear in terms of recognising.
Do you think they'd have come if the publicity hadn't been there?
Well, I don't know, but I was pleased. Well, not pleased. You never want to declare a major incident, but what we wanted to do is make sure that government recognises what's happening in Somerset, and we achieved that.
James, what sort of help did you get, and was it adequate? Is it adequate?
What I'd just like to say is we carried that last year the floods went under the radar. We were flooded for 4 months, Currymore 6 months, and it went under the radar. And thanks to Sedgemoor to stepping up and actually declaring it a major incident, and then we had the resources in place to sort of help us. But right at the start, we were left in the dark. No one was helping. We had to evacuate 550 cattle. We started evacuating on a Wednesday afternoon. Wednesday morning, we asked for assistance, and none was coming forward. Everything took so long, and we didn't have time to take that long.
Are you sure you didn't get help? Because the emergency services tell us that you did.
We had Sedgemoor District Council, or Somerset County Council, sent a young lady and a chap out, and they came out at 9 o'clock, and they said, don't worry, the army are coming in with diggers, we're going to dig you in, we're going to put pumps in place, sandbags. By lunchtime, nothing had turned up. I rang my friend, who's a contractor. He came in with his slew, started digging banks, and I said to him, don't worry, the army are coming in. Nothing came. 4 o'clock, we made the decision we had to evacuate. It was on the road about 6 inches,
so
7 inches.
Who do you hold responsible for that, for not helping you out?
Well, didn't seem to be from silver and gold. There didn't seem to be a joined-up approach at the start.
Okay, the police are here. Chief Superintendent, you're in charge of Gold Command.
Yes.
What does that actually mean, Gold Command?
Well, I chair the strategic coordinating group, and as police we tend to chair that and coordinate, certainly with the blue light responses, but with other organisations, the local authorities. We have voluntary agencies there, and let's coordinate what was then declared as a major incident.
Let me just ask people here, did that seem to work? No, absolutely not. In what way didn't it work? Who's got a point? Yes, sir, with the glasses.
It clearly didn't work because the volunteer group Flag created itself by local people coming together, helping each other out and doing exactly that task, which is try to be done from the top down, but needs to be run from the bottom up.
Okay, and the person there with a hand up, yeah?
Yes, I think in our village...
the lady behind, sorry. And behind, yeah, you.
I've got to congratulate the police on what they did for me. I've got 12 German Shepherd dogs. Anybody here probably terrified of them. I had 7 burly policemen turn up and led my dogs out, and one of them actually admitted he was terrified of German Shepherds. They also built a bridge... Sorry, I'm getting emotional again. Built a bridge over a very deep ring to get my very ancient Shetland pony out. The police were bloody marvellous, but nobody else turned up. Nobody. We were cut off on December the 5th.
Okay, let's take a comment from this gentleman here.
In our village, the police took a long time to turn up. There was no security, there was very little difficulty, and all the warning we had was an announcement from a helicopter saying we must leave immediately. So very little personal contact, very little preparation, and very badly organised.
Yelling from a helicopter is not much use, the gentleman's saying.
We had worked considerably hard before then. We had done a number of warning and informing. We had a lot of neighbourhood teams that were out constantly knocking on doors, we were doing resident letter drops, we were going onto websites, we were using social media.
But did anyone know who was actually in charge? Was it David Cameron, or was it you, or was it the man from the council, or was it the Environment Agency? Who was it?
Certainly from our response, because the major incident was then declared, that's when the process sets up. And as a consequence to that, it does take a small amount of time to get the right players around the table to make
How
those
many
decisions.
times did you visit from the council and see what was going on?
In terms of the community, we had people visiting on a very regular basis.
Did you pop down at all or not?
I actually live in the area, so yes, I've been more or less constantly in the Levels since the beginning of this.
See, the county council was involved in internal troubles at the time, wasn't it? Your chief executive wasn't at her desk, all sorts of things going on behind the scenes. Did you take your eye off the ball?
Never. No, we didn't. And my leadership's been there from the beginning, so there's been no ambiguity there. That particular other issue really didn't feature.
Richard Cresswell from the Environment Agency. Have you been satisfied with the way that your people have responded and what you've done?
Well, we had three months, which has amounted to the wettest winter for 250 years. And so, you know, that is, and through that 3 months, I think there were probably only 2 or 3 days where it didn't rain, which gives a major problem for the Somerset Levels and has resulted in the massive flooding we've seen. And I must say how sorry and sympathetic I am for everybody, and I've been out and seen some of that firsthand. But I think right from the start, we set up our incident rooms, and our job is to do the warning and informing and do the get everybody geared up to what is happening. But of course, what happened was it rained and then it kept raining, and I think, you know, some of the stories is because it's kept raining for 3 months without stop.
Could you have brought the pumps in earlier? Were those pumps offered to you and not actually switched on?
One of the problems with pumps is that we have one main river out of the patch, which is the River Parrett, and all the water that's pumped needs to go out through that route. So we can't turn on the pumps until there's capacity in the river. Right late on in the incident, we've been having working to get the Sowie, which is a flood relief channel, working so that we can take water from the top. But that came in much later when the incident got to the sort of proportions it has now.
James, is it realistic, the sort of help that you were expecting? After all, the police are here, you know, they catch criminals and they do crime prevention. They're not used to moving cattle.
No, they aren't. I just want to respond to Richard's. You know, I know we've had a lot of rain, but Currymore started flooding after 1.5 inches of water. You know, that is just, it's not acceptable. Just, you know, this was in December, before all of the rain. So that moor was full before the extra rain that filled up the moor. Also, we were calling for a week before Christmas, 8 days before Christmas, for Northmoor Pumping Station to put the auxiliary pumps on, which I was told they're not needed. It isn't that bad. You know, I've lived there all my life, my father before, and, you know, there didn't seem to be anybody listening to the locals. We know, you know, just by going out on the moors and farming the land, how high the water was getting, and it went way above winter level.
Okay, well, let's speak to Ravi Singh, who came here as a volunteer. Ravi, welcome. What struck you?
What struck me, as a member of the Carlside International Relief Team, I work around the world in major disasters. And to be honest, if you ask me an overall, as an observer of what went on here in our own country compared to third world country, as we say, it was absolute failure, because I was here for a week at Borough Bridge, and really with lots of these volunteers getting stuck in, and there was no presence from any official agencies.
Sorry, just to get this clear,
Well,
you worked in developing countries.
We were lifting everything ourselves. We were sandbagging. We were delivering with the flag guys. I didn't see any presence. So other parts of the world is completely different, and they're like not so rich. In this country, we have everything, yet we had nothing. You know, for the disaster.
Pat Flaherty, we're worse at responding to an emergency involving 100 flooded houses than they are in some developing countries.
Well, indeed, obviously the community coming together, as they have done, Flag and other groups, is just a remarkable response.
Who should be lifting the sandbags? Is that actually down to us? the public, or should we look to the authorities?
It's an absolute mixed picture, isn't it? And that's exactly the reasons why I asked, and the Marines came in when they did. Because of that, the situation was getting worse. More communities were being overwhelmed. We knew that we needed more people on the ground, and that's why we effectively changed national policy to get the Marines in so that they could help with whatever we needed to be done.
Okay. Ravi, you came here, didn't you, for a day to help?
Yeah.
And how long have you stayed?
On the 8th of February, I think the worst flooded levels at the time. Came for 1 day, stayed a week. There was so much to do. And the Marines, I only saw the Marines towards the last few days of my stay for a week here. And all the sandbagging was being done by the locals, by the volunteers. And there's something I'd like to also point out here. I think if there has been better coordination, we would have, Carlside would have turned up earlier on the 7th, which is a Friday, on a BBC Radio 5 Live. I heard somebody from Somerset really upset. Where are the international agencies? We responded. I rang every single agency, we can help, what do you need? And they all turned away. It was Jim Winkworth from the King Alfred who said, come down, we need you, otherwise we won't be here.
Okay, well, Jim, we're very glad that you are here. Sorry, Ravi. You've got a question for us as well.
Yeah, the question is, how will the government and its associated agencies build trust with the local communities in the flood-affected areas of Somerset after such a monumental failure?
Okay, and you're sticking to your view that it was a failure?
It was.
Is that a general consensus, or is that... From the Environment Agency, how are you going to rebuild trust?
Well, I think one of the things is, as people have said, sitting down and talking. We did a lot of that after 2012. And indeed...
didn't change much, though, did it?
Well, I disagree. In 2012, we sat down with the internal drainage boards and local people and said, we need to do something to try and alleviate the problem. We looked at 3 major initiatives that would have helped, and one of them was indeed the 8-kilometre dredge that many people will know about.
Okay.
We immediately, and so this is over 12 months ago.
But so rebuilding trust, I mean, your image has been tarnished perhaps down here. What are you going to do?
Well, we will talk to people because, but at the moment, the priority is to get the water off the land, get people back into their houses. They're not, with the best will in the world, it is not the right time to be trying to engage with the locals on what's going to be the future, because the future for people, I hope, will be getting people back first and then talking, and we can do the rest in parallel.
Let's talk to Tessa Munt, one of the local MPs here. How badly has trust and the relationship with the authorities been affected?
I think it's pretty serious, actually. What I'd say is, rather than sitting down and talking, it should be sitting down and listening, because actually local people have got a very clear idea of how some of this might be sorted out. I don't blame your environmental agency staff, because they've worked very hard where they've been placed in a very impossible situation by an emergency. But actually this was a crisis. We saw it coming last year. I had the flooding minister down last year, and not very much happened. And, the local farmers and landowners have been saying, dredge, 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 dredge. I only cover the axe and the brew area, don't cover the parrot and the tone. But actually what we need to do, perhaps, is something I've been asking for 18 months, and that is saying, OK, fine, the Environment Agency is there to look after wildlife and flora and fauna, but actually, my view is let's do butter, not just buttercups. We need to actually make sure that we make the agency reflect the value of productive land. It's got to be like that.
Right.
Otherwise,
we're going to be talking about
change.
dredging a lot, but just talking about the response at the moment. Perhaps come here to the second row. Hello.
I think there is a need for the response to be looked at, not just solely for the County Council's point of view, but being a volunteer and helping firsthand. No disrespect to anyone, but when we went to Gold Command, Silver Command, I'm sure many of my colleagues here will agree, it was just way too slow. People needed help, and they needed help now, not 2 days' time when we were told sandbags would arrive. It was just too slow.
One last response from the Gold Commander here to all that.
I think with the coordination response, and I do accept some of the comments to say the frustration they didn't see it, but believe me, there was a lot of very good people working very hard on the ground 24/7. And I think that the difficulty was, and in a way it was in a way a victim of own success, in that the flag and the community resilience and the can-do actually created an additional demand. And for us to come in...
So if you'd all fallen to pieces, then more help would have arrived. Is that what you're saying?
I think from our point of view is that with the flag and some of the needs, the concentration of efforts then wherever was demanded of at the time, where other coordinated groups needed to respond in a coordinated way because everyone had such a diverse set of needs, accepting that some obviously were clearly flooded.
Okay. Let's pause for a moment. We've plenty more to discuss. I do promise we'll come back to the audience. But let's go back onto the levels to remind ourselves of how this drama unfolded.
You know, I can deal with most things, but this is my life.
What really did cause the worst floods in living memory? In spite of the frantic efforts to pump it out, the water is still there. Families in temporary homes.
I got my crane. That was the one thing you were worried about rescuing, wasn't it?
Who knows for how long? In the village of Muchelney on the Somerset Levels, people are still having to reach their homes by boat. Now, if you want the clearest possible indication of just how much the extent of this flooding took people by surprise, well, the County Council actually hired this boat for 2 weeks. They thought, as did most people, that the floodwaters would have gone by then. But as I speak, it is now 9 weeks since the village of Muchelney was marooned. When you visit Muchelney, you realise that with every waterlogged day that passes, well, the anger gets deeper.
Nice to see you again after a couple of weeks.
What do you think next year? Do you think we'll be here standing on the edge of a flooded Muchelney again next year?
I think there'll be a riot if we're doing that. There's jolly nearly a riot now. We're very close to the edge in Muchelney here. We've had enough.
Wind the clock back to November 2012 and there was a taste of what was to come. James Winslade took me on a tour of his farm near Moorland.
860 acres and we've got 790 underwater.
Back then there was anger that the flooding had been caused by a lack of river maintenance, dredging. The chairman of the Environment Agency, Lord Smith, felt the full force of anger when he visited the Somerset Levels towards the end of 2012. And when I pressed him on that word, dredging, this is what he said.
What we need to do is find out here where the best places to dredge are going to be, and then we'll get on and do it.
When?
And that will be as soon as possible.
When?
I would certainly be very disappointed if we weren't seeing some improvement happening in the course of the next 6 months.
And yet 12 months on, that pledge failed to materialise.
Our main story tonight, the West underwater. Parts of Somerset remain cut off and the bad weather isn't over yet.
Every road into Muchelney is flooded. I was hiring a boat again to reach the stranded village of Muchelney. And farmer James Winslade was fast beginning to realise that the floods of 2012 were nothing compared to what he was facing now. In the end, he had to evacuate his farm to save his animals from drowning.
You'll ask him to move.
And one night in February, what had already become a major incident became an emergency as the village of Moorland was evacuated. Homes that had never flooded before, overwhelmed in just a few hours. By now, the worst floods in living memory were attracting national attention and VIP visitors, from royalty to politicians.
Why was this not done ages ago? Why have you only
Some
started doing this
more
now?
welcome than others. In the end, the Prime Minister himself stepped in to promise what the people of Somerset had been demanding for years.
More dredging needs to be done, more dredging will be done. And
was that a failure on your behalf not to allow that?
As I said on Friday, we've learnt the lessons, we need to learn the lessons of the past, and that means more dredging is going to take place as soon as it's safe to do so.
People do want answers. They do want solutions. This man, Ken Tatum, now retired, was once the flood defence manager with the Environment Agency in Somerset.
My concern is that what we're doing here is, in doing the dredging, because the Prime Minister says so, is giving people false hope. They've been devastated by this flood. They need to plan their future. And it would be fair to tell them the truth, not to tell them, oh, dredging is going to solve everything.
So politicians at the highest level have reacted to the ongoing flooding crisis here in Somerset. But the question is, have they reacted to genuinely fix the problem, or are they merely telling the flood victims of Somerset what they want to hear? Will they make good on their pledges? And even if they do, will that prevent flooding like this happening again?
Let's talk about the D word. We've already touched on it, but it's D for dredging, or the lack of it. Our next question comes from Neil Craddock, who runs a business in Boroughbridge. Mr. Craddock. Hello, yes.
Why did the Environment Agency not dredge the rivers when the cost of it pales into insignificance compared to the cost of cleaning up?
Why do you think they didn't do it?
Well, we were constantly being told that there was no budget, but the cost of this cleanup must be absolutely enormous by comparison.
And what's been the cost to you in your business?
We've completely lost our business for the second year running. We've now had to move our business to another factory that we've had to rent, although we own the property on the levels there, and we're having to completely set up again.
Richard Cresswell, why haven't you dredged?
Well, over the past 25 years, progressively, successive governments have moved investment towards using the money to protect as many people and properties as possible. And that inevitably has meant that sparsely populated areas has not benefited as much. But the benefit of that, of course, is that 1.4 million houses have been protected over this three-month period, and in Somerset, 3,500 have been protected. And huge sympathy for the 120 or 150 that have been flooded. But it doesn't stack up against the benefit cases for other parts of the country.
So you've got this rule that if you spend £1 on flood prevention, you have to save £8 worth of damage. Is that right?
No, what we do is look at what the benefit is, and there's a formula. And we wanted to do the 8-kilometre dredge after 2012, and that was worked out with the IDBs. But the amount of money that the national formula allows us to put in is 360,000 towards that, and indeed the county council put in 300,000, and other people did as well. But we then needed to raise the rest of that money.
So Richard, let me just be clear. Is it that you wanted to dredge but you couldn't afford it, or you didn't really want to dredge anyway?
After 2012, we employed consultants to look at what the right options were. And dredging would most definitely have delayed the onset of flooding in 2013-14. It would have meant that the flooding was not as extensive and would have enabled us to pump off more quickly.
So it was a mistake not to do it?
It were the shame, and that's a real understatement, is that we did not get the urgency to get funding through 2012, so that we could have got started to get on with that dredging.
So you wanted to dredge, but you couldn't afford it?
If that's the way you want to put it, yes.
Is that the way you want to put it?
Yeah.
Is that the way you want to put it?
Well, in terms of competing demands elsewhere in the country, we have to follow that formula.
Dr. Chris Parker is here from the University of the West of England. Where are you, Dr. Parker? Just give us the academic view of dredging. Does it work? Is it worth doing?
So dredging can definitely work in certain places at certain times. The way dredging works is that you increase the cross-sectional area of the channel, and thereby you attempt to increase the conveyance capacity, how much volume of water per second can fit through the channel. The reason why dredging is less successful on the levels compared to elsewhere is there's three different reasons. Firstly is the slope of the levels. In fact, it's extremely slight. There's very little hydraulic gradient, meaning that even though you're increasing the cross-sectional area of the channels, the amount of water that can leave is reduced.
Okay, just cut to the chase. Does that mean they shouldn't have dredged?
It means that money spent on dredging on the Somerset Levels can be better spent elsewhere.
Right. Now, is that something that's accepted by the audience here, that actually it's not worth the money? Sir?
It's not so. If you look at the results done within the 1960 Tone Vale dredging scheme, you will find that the river is now running at less than 60% of its capacity at that time. The riverbed has come up by nearly 3 metres.
Okay, gentleman behind you. Yes, sir.
If that's the case, I was in a meeting with Lord Smith a few weeks ago when he came to visit the levels.
The boss of the Environment Agency.
And he guaranteed us that they were going to dredge the Tone and the Parrot.
Absolutely.
Now, why did he say that if there's no point in doing it?
Let's bring in Sue Armstrong-Brown from the Royal Society for the Prevention of Birds, Protection of Birds, I should say. You're not a fan of dredging, are you?
You have to use dredging very carefully. It's a technique that can be good. As the gentleman over there said, it can be used to speed up water going down a river. That's effectively what it's for. It wouldn't have stopped these floods. It would have helped get the water off quicker if that dredge had been done. But that's what you can use dredging for. We do use it sometimes as a conservation tool on some of our own land, but broadly, it's an incredibly difficult technique to get right. It can cause enormous environmental damage if used wrong. And one of the big concerns that's come out of this event and this crisis, which has left so many people in such an awful situation, is unfortunately there's been an oversimplification of the solutions, and dredging is not the panacea.
Were you behind the scenes quietly campaigning for there not to be dredging?
Yes. We're given a huge amount of power in the commentary around this. Apparently we run the government and the Environment Agency and the flood defence budget, which is marvellous, but actually it's not really true, and we don't have that amount of power.
But you certainly campaign against over-dredging, don't you?
We do campaign against over-dredging because it's very damaging to the wildlife. Let's remember what rivers do. Rivers are places where water flows from land to sea, and that can be, at the moment, that's the critical function we're talking about, getting water off the land. But they're also where the life in the countryside predominantly lives. They're these habitats for wildlife, things that most of the people here in the audience love.
But there is
and
no
taking
habitat.
a plough through that can cause tremendous damage.
There is no habitat.
Okay, let's get, yes, gentleman with the fluorescent jacket.
Right, you say about the money's not well spent, but how much is this really costing the government and the taxpayer? One, to hire in the pumps and the engineers to run them, the authorities, all the people working on this, and then how much is the clear-up going to cost?
What about the wider point about the environment and that we actually share this with some pretty sensitive creatures? Yes, sir, you in the front row.
Dredging, these are man-made channels in Somerset, and I would agree with the lady from the RSPB. There are certain places you certainly don't want to dredge. You shouldn't really dredge in the upstream catchments because you increase the flow into the downstream reaches. But in Somerset Levels and moors, you're dealing with man-made channels. So the function of them is drainage and not environment. Now, we need to get the balance right between the environment and the dredging, but they are there to perform a function of drainage and to pass the water from the uplands to the lowland.
Do people accept that just to say dredge is an oversimplification? Yeah?
It is not an oversimplification. It's the obvious thing to do. We worked out the cost of dredging over a 20-year period is far cheaper than the cost of pumping over that self-same period. This was over the 3 of the moors. Now, we didn't know at that time that the floods of this winter was going to be nearly as high. In fact, the cost of all this pumping is ruinous compared with the cost of dredging.
All right.
This is
I
taxpayers'
just want
money.
to bring in James one more time. Your view, James, your family have known these lands for 150 years.
Yeah, we've never...
Do you think there should be more dredging?
Yeah, well, you know, if a channel it's like you're guttering on a house. If it's half full of silt, it will run over the house, do more damage. If you clear the guttering, it will go down the way it should be into the drains. If you've got a channel that's silted up between 42 and 50%, surely if there's 50% more water going down that channel, there's 50% less water being pumped.
What's your land like? I mean, how high is the water now?
Now it's about 12 foot deep on the land and 6 foot in my house. Well, it's gone down 4 foot in the last 6 days. So.
And what would it have been like had they dredged?
It wouldn't have come into the properties. It would have been flooded the land without a doubt because we've had a huge amount of rain. But it wouldn't, crucially, have come in. It might have come into my house, but it wouldn't have come into Moorland Village.
Let's take another question. Edwin White. Mr. White. Hello, Mr. White.
Hello. Following on from the comment about man-made, the Somerset Levels is a man-made environment and therefore requires man management. And my question really is, should conservationists not seek out natural habitats elsewhere in the country?
Good idea. Yeah. Sue Armstrong Brown, I think he's talking about you.
I think he is. So it's absolutely right. This is a unique place that has evolved over centuries of man, and when you think about the nature's point of view, they've evolved along with it. So now it's England's biggest lowland wet grassland.
Ian Littlegranger, one of the local MPs, Ian Littlegranger, I think the Environment Agency may have heard of him, has claimed that £31 million had been spent building a bird sanctuary, but they couldn't find any money to dredge the rivers.
So I would like to shoot a few sacred cows here, if I may. First
of all, it's very dangerous in farmland, but yeah, go on.
It wasn't £30 million, it was 20. Second, that's the Sturt Peninsula managed retreat. Let me finish, please. Second, that was a managed retreat that has protected 83 houses in the village of Sturt from the coastal surges that we've seen. That has helped. That is part of the solution for the future. If we cannot pour enough concrete to protect all of our coast from rising sea levels and from storm surges, these sorts of things are actually a bargain if you think about the alternative. So the stats show that we're very likely to see more of this sort of event, and our flood risk nationally is going to go up. The Environment Agency would have to spend £20 million extra every year, year on year, just to keep our flood risk the same. What really matters is thinking of the good, proactive management solutions for the future so that we don't end up in this place again.
Don't forget, you can get involved on Twitter. Our hashtag is IOFloods. Richard, from the Environment Agency, were organisations like the RSPB bullying you not to dredge?
No, absolutely not. I mean, we are looking. Our main aim in this is to protect people and property. And we
are
go
you
through
torn
that
between?
argument.
Are you as one agency? Who are you looking after? Are you looking after the birds, or are you looking after the people?
With our flood risk money, we are looking after the people and property. But
So
that does not.
Who comes first? You'll forgive me, in the pecking order.
People come first, and property comes second.
Birds come...
But then there has to be a balance. Because, you know, none of us just want to live in a concrete jungle. This is about getting the balance. And the people in Somerset live in a very special place, and it is the people in Somerset who make it a very special place because of the way they farm. And a lot of the money that comes in through those subsidies to make sure that the little bits, the fields are wet and splash, that is money that comes into the economy, and that is part of the farming economy on the levels and moors.
But David, if we can't farm, the birds aren't going to be there. And at the moment, you know, the situation is that we can't farm. So, you know, I don't care how much money you pump in, unless the farm, you know, the ground is farmed, the birds are not going to be there.
And that's true. So the nature that lives in the levels depends on positive management from the farmers. If you took all the farmers out and reverted to a swamp, you would not have the richness of wildlife that makes this such a unique and special place. So we need to see what we can do to get land management in the levels into a state where it can withstand an increased flood risk.
There does seem to be some difference, doesn't there, between the people who work the land and know this area extremely well, and the academics and the people in Whitehall who know the subject from a different point of view. Who is right? Who should we believe as taxpayers to protect this environment? Yes, sir.
You should believe the farmers. Can I just make a comment?
All right, a couple more comments. Yes, sir.
There's a fundamental question that hasn't been answered yet. Way back in the 16 and 1700s, the Dutch engineers designed this system for water management. The question that has to be asked is it fit for purpose today, given the climatic changes and the fact that whatever the Prime Minister says, he can't change the jet stream and he can't deal with what may be happening in the Pacific. If the system is still fit for purpose, is it a simple 8 kilometres of dredging, or is there something else we need to do if that isn't the case?
All right.
Is it still fit for purpose or not?
OK, that's something we're going to come on to actually now. Because some people are still out of their homes, and who knows for how long. Like many families, Dee and her 9-year-old daughter Rebecca had to leave their house in Moreland as the waters rose, and they'll be in rented accommodation for many months. Here's their story.
The helicopter came right over our house, started shouting evacuate. So we all worked together in my family, got all the stuff in the attic. We left in what we stood in, so I was just stood in like pyjamas, and that's all I left in.
It had a very tangible feel of just utter panic. Nobody knew what to say, nobody knew how to advise. Everybody had a different opinion about it, and as a result, the villagers were left scarpered and lost and frightened.
I felt like I was in like Titanic and put without a boat, and I was just like, the whole village was going down in water. I did actually go into school with my wellies on because I didn't have my school shoes, and we did a 30-hour dance-a-thon in my wellies, which was very painful.
No. We endeavour to make sure that she's kept stable because she's got to function as a 9-year-old. You know, we don't want her to feel like a victim. We want her to feel, I want all my children to eventually come back in 10 years' time and say, do you remember when we were flooded? And see it as a positive.
I wish I was somebody like that, but I'm not. I'm just
I feel like I have to go back to my house because it feels like this is a holiday home, and I'm staying in here for like 5 or 2 days, but it's not, it's actually a year, and sometimes I really want to go back to my house.
If I was offered the money to buy my house outright, to go, as much as I love my village and my neighbours, I probably would. I would probably go, as much as I would hate to leave everybody behind, because I can't do this again. I can't do it again. I can't see my kids go through it. I can't see myself and my partner go through it. No, that would be it.
And Dee is here now. Dee, what a remarkable daughter you've got.
chatty, to say the least.
How are things now?
Still hard. Not as hard as the people that rely on the levels for a living, but yeah, it's hard. It's hard to keep morale up, it's hard to keep going, and when you think to yourself that you've got 12 months minimum to keep going, yeah.
Can you see the end in sight for this nightmare for you?
No. We've been told 12 months, but how, you know, living with 5 children, seeing day to day is hard. So for somebody to say to you, I'm sorry, we're now going to take your house, we're going to take everything that you considered normal and sort yourself out for 12 months and then we'll think about giving it you back. No, I can't see light at the end of the minute.
And do you own your house or do you rent it?
No, we're mortgaged.
And how much is your house worth now?
0, as well as everybody else in this room. we've lost everything. We've lost everything. They'll recede the waters. They'll take the waters away. The council will bring the mops and the buckets, and they'll do the best that they can to mop up the job that sadly was left too late in the first place. But it will be us sat here that's left counting the cost.
And you've got a question, haven't you?
Yes, my question is, raising 5 small children, if I was, as I said on the VT, if I was to have to go through this again next year, we would fail. As a family, we would fail. And my question is, if you cannot guarantee that this water will not come again and they're not going to flood an entire village, this isn't the Thames where it's an overspill, you flooded an entire community. If you cannot guarantee that, who is going to buy my house? Where is my children's inheritance? Because at the minute, it's gone.
Okay. Tessa Munt, if the people here can't be guaranteed a dry home, should the government step in and say, we'll buy your house?
Well, no, I think there's an alternative, because I think there are plans. I gather there's a plan being put together at the moment, which was meant to be completed, I think, at some point this week. But you've heard from people in the room here that there were things that could have been done that alleviated the problem. And frankly, in my area, the land it's all man managed. It was man, created the area.
She wants to know if anyone will buy her house.
But I don't.
What we
need to do.
Tessa, she goes to the estate agent tomorrow. What are they going to say to her?
They're going to say her house is worth nothing. The lady said that herself.
How many people are in that position here that
Probably
their house
quite
is
a lot.
worth nothing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people.
And James.
And James
Yeah.
behind
And
me.
that's serious. There's a business. Now, there are little bits of pots of money that I'm trying to work out whether there's 1 pot of money, 2 pots of money, 3, or whether they're being multiple counted. And there are various things that are being put together to try and make it better for people. But actually, we need to take action. We talked about it last year. Here we are this year. There's no guarantee it's not going to happen at some point. We've had it happen 3 times in 6 years. We've got to make sure that the plan is absolutely ready, that somebody is in control, and we do something.
Would those people who do have properties on the levels which are flooded just put their hands up again, please, so we can see? And keep your hands up if you would now, if the government said, all right, we'll give you a cheque, we'll buy your house at market value, you go and live in Bridgwater or wherever you want to. How many people would leave? Keep your hands up if you would. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've got 5 people here who would call it a day. What would it mean for you to leave your home?
It would be, it's something where we've lived in this house for 28 years. It's our heritage. We've got so much involvement, and it would mean leaving our friends and families.
But you'd do it. If someone offered you the money, you'd do it.
If there was going to be going through this, we would do it if there was no guarantee, and it was going to be year in, year out. It happened last year when we were nearly flooded. It happened in 2000. And what I'm appalled by, there have been successive government reports produced 2002, the flooding summit last year, and the national politicians didn't listen and say, here are the resources to solve this problem.
Let's talk to the Environment Agency again. Richard, is it sensible to try to save the levels, given that we're told the climate is changing, sea levels are rising, a lot of properties are at or near sea level? Should people actually say, let's go and live somewhere else? Let's just hand this over to the birds and the bees and all the rest of it.
I think this is a mixed economy. I think everybody here knows that that some dredging of the type we're talking about will help it. I think we're also talking about a number of other things like the Surrey Relief Channel, which we will develop further.
Should in the long term the levels be abandoned?
Well, if you abandon them, then you will lose a lot of the. Well, you will lose 2 or 3 things. First of all, you'll lose all the communities. Secondly, you'll lose a lot of the wildlife that is there, that is there to be, why they're designated and it's a special place. I think this is something that the community and the agencies can work together. I think it would be wrong for us to say we can prevent flooding, because I don't think we can, but I think it can be substantially reduced, and there may be some properties.
So they like it or lump it. Yes, James.
We're one of the last moors before Bridgwater, and really, if we'd had 2 more inches of rain, which equates to another 8 inches on our moor, Bridgwater, and we've seen by all the work, making the bund and putting all the Dutch pumps in, all in emergency. They're next. There is no other moor left to fill up. So Bridgwater is next. So you cannot use the moors as a storage pen just to have them flooded all the time.
Is that what you're doing, really? Are you using the moors as a giant sponge
Of course they are,
to protect,
because it's
to protect Bridgwater?
Well, certain of the moors, this is historical, and the moors are lands which have been flooded in the way that they are for hundreds of years.
Not to the level, only 6 inches to
absolutely, but we have to remember that we've just had the wettest winter for 250 years. One of the things that we'll have to consider is, what do we do? Do we protect up to a 250-year event, or do we say a 100-year event? We've got to work out what is economic. And there will be some properties in the very low-lying areas that flood every year.
Have you deliberately allowed areas here to flood to protect Bridgwater?
We don't. The spillways
Richard,
are at the levels.
The
spillways are where they have been, and we don't open these sluices. The water goes over those spillways, and the reason there are spillways is because we try to control where it goes. Because if you didn't have a spillway, it would just go over the banks.
Have you controlled
randomly.
it so it's here to protect Bridgwater? It's not an unreasonable thing to do.
It's a lack of maintenance.
It's there actually to protect the whole of the levels and moors, because if you let it come out everywhere, then it would randomly flood all sorts of different parts of the levels and moors.
Armstrong Brown, should the levels be abandoned?
No, they shouldn't.
In the long term, not tomorrow, but in the long term.
No, they shouldn't be abandoned, but we do need to be much more creative about working out what the future's going to be. So, yes, climate change. All the predictions about climate change say that we are going to see more of this sort of event. And this year, it was a crisis, it was unique, amazing response from the community, huge volunteer effort. Would that be there if it happened every year? I don't think so. I think we need to have a plan. And the plan has to not only include making sure the infrastructure on the levels is suitable and can move the water around appropriately and get it off, it also needs to look at the wider catchment. And this doesn't just go for Somerset, this is a national problem. 50% of the soils, about half of the soils in the catchment, are managed so that they're compacted and the water shoots off, increasing flooding problems in places like this.
A little bit of response would be nice from someone who hasn't spoken before. Yes, the lady in the cap. Hello.
Hi, I'm the animal coordinator for FLAG. So we've got most of the animals moved, rehomed, fed. We've still got loads of donations coming in. 20 years ago, my partner was employed to dredge the banks. The silt was put on top of the banks were rotivated, replanted, problem solved. In the last 4 days, I've had in 3 dead barn owls. I run my own rescue centre. Now, everybody wants to protect the British wildlife. These barn owls are dying because the farmland is underwater, there's no crops, there's no mice, there's no food.
And are you under the impression, do you believe that the levels can be saved, that whatever it takes, whatever we need to build, they should stay here?
If your guttering is blocked, you unblock it. The water will run.
All right.
Years ago, the rivers were dredged. It was put on the banks, which made the banks higher.
Okay.
Wasn't so much housing either.
Sorry?
There wasn't so much housing with all the water coming from other areas. Taunton, Yeovil, Frome. Thousands of houses are planned to be built, and where's the water? No SUDs. Sustainable urban drainage.
Okay. People have got to live somewhere, haven't they?
Yeah, but to control the water so it doesn't flow any more than when it was green fields.
Okay, so what other options are there for the future? Well, the 20-year plan for the levels is due out later this week, and while we don't know exactly what will be in it, lots of suggestions are being made, including raising the roads, becoming more resilient, and even, I've heard, a barrage on the River Parrett. So what is the best way to progress from here? From the Environment Agency's point of view, what should we do? Is there anything that could stop these people going through what they've had to go through?
Well, as I've said before, it can be substantially reduced.
But not eliminated?
But it will not be eliminated.
It will not be eliminated. Does everyone sort of get that and accept it or not? So let's go, sir, and in the front row, we haven't heard from you.
In weather systems like this, we expect to be flooded in the winter, but we don't expect it to come so quick or last so long. If they had maintained the waterways and the sluices and all the waterways that they're meant to maintain to the proper standard, we wouldn't have half the problem we have at the moment.
Somerset County Council, was this neglect from everybody? Is this neglect?
I think we need to take the matter of managing the levels a lot more seriously. I think this is doable. I don't think we should give up on the levels at all.
And what would you like to see in the future?
We've already said quite clearly we'd like to see the rivers dredged, and very quickly. That's why we put money into that pot. We've now seen that if what I call inelegantly the bypass pumping around the King Sedgemoor drain works. So why not keep that as the plan B? Stop the tide coming in and locking the system, and many, many more things beyond. But we've done this for centuries.
Okay, let's go to the Landscape Institute. Sue Illman, what's your view on the future?
Well, I'm not a Somerset person, so I feel...
Well, you're allowed in Bridgwater. You don't have to be from
I'm
Somerset.
I'm a visitor from Gloucestershire, and we certainly experienced the floods in 2007. I think we had a lot of concern that there was seeming to be some quite knee-jerk responses to the problems that were happening, not just here, but elsewhere in the country. And I think we were very concerned to feel that there should be a much more detailed and considered response about catchment management, about what we do and how we plan throughout catchments, but also about how we look at our towns and cities, as the gentleman mentioned, how we deal with drainage from new development and how we look at making our cities and towns more resilient. So I think there's a whole range of measures that need to be put in place.
All right, let's talk to some other people.
Just very
Ravi,
quickly.
yeah?
I think the main problem is I don't think the agencies are communicating with the real people like James. I think there's a big gap in real life. I think we're talking about it here, but what I hear from people in Boroughbridge, there's not many people from the community on these consulting boards.
Okay. Any other? Yes, we haven't heard from you. Would you like to make a point?
The volunteers were there and were helping out. The teams are sitting here in front of you, young men who've been out there at the beginning. There's a lot more contingency and things that we've worked on since then. But I would just like to say personal thank you for working with all these wonderful teams of people who've just come from all over the place to actually be there on the front line and help out.
Who here has been actually had to take help from these volunteers? Yes, sir.
I've already spoken. I said they were absolutely marvellous.
Yes.
Really wonderful.
But you've had to go and ask for assistance?
I didn't have to go and ask, but it saved me an awful lot of time and effort. Thank you.
Well, I think give yourselves a round of applause, the volunteers. Just as we come to the last few moments of the programme, just want to ask one question about the community response. How long is that going to be going before you actually wind it down?
As long as it's needed. As long as it's needed. The clean-up operation hasn't started yet. Some houses today were stripped by the team, but it's massive. It's going to take weeks and weeks and weeks, and lots of people can't afford the excess of the insurance because they were flooded before or couldn't afford insurance, full stop.
And where's this help coming from? Is it coming from the council?
All of us.
And the government, or
No,
where? Who's donating?
No, it's coming from volunteers and great businesses and individuals that are donating from right across the country. But essentially, it's the hard work of volunteers that want to help. And if you want something positive out of this, community spirit of all the people here that have helped. It's a disaster on our doorstep, but we've seen the very best of people come out in this as well.
Thank you. And that is it from this special BBC debate. We've had a passionate and sometimes heated discussion. The government has promised to help bail out this area. Dredging is scheduled to start soon, and we await the 20-year plan for the future of this historic and very beautiful part of our country. Our thanks to our panel, to our audience here, and to you at home for watching tonight. Let's hope for a long, hot summer. From Bridgwater, good night.